everybody. Welcome to Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined by friend Davis this week. Davis, how you doing?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I am okay. I stayed up way too late last night, and I had a long day yesterday, so I am tired. I was falling asleep on stream last night, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it was rough.
What were you doing yesterday?
I did a bunch of yard work yesterday, working with chainsaws and hedge trimmers and pulling weeds and ripping things. Yeah, so I think it's been a while since you've seen the backyard, but these vines came in and wrapped all the way around the shed in the back. So they had actually wrapped across the door, so you couldn't open the door to get into the shed. So I had to cut through them and rip them off the house. And then I found more as I was walking through, and I was trimming hedges and bushes. And it's fine. It is what it is.
Sure. I mean, you picked a bad day to do it. It was like 90 out yesterday.
Yeah, it was, but it's the only day that wasn't raining.
That's true.
So it had to get done. And then, it mowed the lawn and all that stuff. But the thing that made me so tired was, it's just poor design, is the hedge trimmer. Most people are right-handed, so most devices are developed for right-handed people. And it's got a trigger, like a gun trigger. And obviously that makes the blades go,
Yeah.
And but the motor is on the left. Like where you would hold it with your left hand. So your non-dominant hand is holding the motor. And so it's got the weight of the motor and the weight of the blades itself. And so after about an hour, my left shoulder was like on the ground. So it was fun. It is all right though.
Cool.
I got halfway through what I needed to get through, and we'll pick it back up, but
good.
Tiring day.
Yeah, I can imagine. Jeez.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah. Nice to get outside.
Yes, we could all use to get outside more.
Well, let's talk about things that involve not going outside, because the show's about video games, damn it.
Yes.
So, you are the guest, and because of that, I have to seize back control, so you can go second. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
What have you been playing?
So I have been playing a game called Atelier Marie Remake. So Atelier Marie Remake is a remake of a game that came out in 1997 for the PlayStation, only in Japan. This is the first game in the, make sure I pronounce this right, Atelier. Did I get it?
Atelier, yeah, sure. I don't know.
Okay, close enough.
But I've hit my douchebag quota for the episode.
Stop. So this is the first game in the series. Like all these games like revolve around, you're an alchemist, and you're kind of, the main like gameplay is you collecting items and combining all these items into recipes through alchemy to make stuff for other people and advance further in the game. So this game, I'm playing it on PS5. It's available PS5, PS4, Switch, and PC. It is $50. It is digital only, which is, that kind of stinks. I believe it is because so my understanding is that Sony, for the longest time, they would not get a physical release of a game if it does not have an English dub, and this game does not have an English dub.
Interesting.
So I'm assuming that is why this game never got a physical release. I would have liked to have bought it physical, but it is what it is. So this game, you play as a young woman named Marlone. Anyway, but Marie for short, that's the title of the game. But so you are a student of alchemy, and apparently you're like the worst student in your class. So like you're like basically on the verge of failing out. So your teacher decides, I'm going to give you one more chance to like make this, make something exceptional. So I'm going to give you 5 years to do it, which sounds like a long time, but I'll get into like how that.
Yeah, I was going to say,
yeah,
you got one last shot. You have half a decade.
Yeah. Here's 5. Yeah. Take 5 years to do this. And then, I'm going to give you this atelier to do all this stuff, to give you, which, on paper, you're like, okay, I know you're a failing student, but I'm going to give you like your own room to do all this shit, and your own like, so that plot hole is kind of, massive, but again, irrelevant. But, so your main gameplay loop. So there's a few systems of this game that I think are pretty interesting and a little strange, I guess, in the context of like modern JRPGs. So you start the day, you wake up, you're in your like room or whatever, and then like you go out into like, so there's like basically a little hub world where there's like a blacksmith, there's a bar, there's the school itself, and then there's, you know, just a couple other locations. And then outside of this little hub world, there's a bunch of environments that you can go to gather items to do all the, you know, to make your make the things that you need to do for like your objectives and stuff. So all these like weird alchemy created items. But so you start it off, you go out and you go to the bar, the Sky Tavern is what it's called, and you talk to the bartender and he'll give you a quest. And almost every single quest I've seen is basically like, go out and collect a bunch of stuff and then fuse all the stuff together and bring me back the item that you fused. So, you know, at some point, I mean, the gameplay loop is pretty, it seems a little light. Like it's still fun and I'm enjoying it, but at the same time, it feels like you're kind of just going out and collecting a bunch of bullshit to like make a thing and then bring it back to the guy. So my big issue with the game so far is the fact that it does a weird, it's really strange with how it works, with how it handles time and how time progresses. Cause like on paper, you're like, all right, 5 years seems like a long time. So I should, you know, I can probably just bang all this out, no problem. But so the way it handles time is when you're out. So a lot of these locations, when you leave the hub world and go to like forage for these items, like half the time it'll take like, all right, it takes like 6 days to get to this location. And I'm like, and then it'll take 6 days to get back. So I'm like, all right, that eats up a lot of time. So, and then when you go to actually forage items in these areas, every time you pick up a thing, it costs you a day. Every time you do a battle, costs you a day.
So it's that Justin Timberlake movie where time is a currency and like you pay your restaurant bill with like 3 years off your life.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In time, the movie
yes,
that everyone's talking about. Yes.
The Amanda Seyfried vehicle in time. Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
So I mean, so in the world of this game, then this little girl, teenager, I assume
she's 19.
19. Okay. Okay. So she, you know, legal adult, but she just disappears for days at a time then.
Yeah, basically.
And she doesn't do anything else. So she just spends 2 weeks of her life walking to and from this town. She has no friends.
Well, okay. So you are able to recruit people to come with you because there is like there's like combat as well. Like there's pretty basic like JRPG, like turn-based combat because you know, when you get out into the world, you're fighting stuff, you're fighting monsters and whatever. So you can have upwards of like 2 people in your party to like go out with the combat. The combat itself is probably the most like basic JRPG combat I've seen in probably, I mean, you know, a lot of the stuff that, you know, a lot of my criticisms with this game being like a little basic and a little thin, can all be kind of chalked up to the fact that this is a game from 1997. And I feel like they've tried really hard to like maintain a lot of the integrity of the original game, almost to its detriment. With that being said, I still think that, the basic gameplay loop is still pretty fun and pretty enjoyable. I like a lot of the characters. A lot of the characters have a lot of like charm to them. And I think that they, I mean, even despite the fact that you're kind of like locked to this like 5-year period and like time seems to go by pretty fast, it never really feels like you're like racing against the clock at all times. But it does definitely feel like a lot of the gameplay feels very, very light and very just kind of like basic in a way that I'm like kind of surprised by. So I think a lot of this game just kind of gets by on its charm and a lot of it. Cause I mean, so in terms of like what they've done for this remake, they've pretty much completely overhauled the visuals in a way where like, the characters have a really interesting look to them. They basically all look like Nendoroids. Like it kind of has like that, I want to compare it to like how Link's Awakening looked on the Switch. When they kind of remade it to everything kind of just looks like a toy, but in this case they look like Nendoroids. Like everybody just looks like kind of like chibis. And I'm
looking at it now. Yeah,
I really like the look of it. I think having like this like Nendoroid come to life look is really neat. I think it really works well for the game. And
is the main character of this game seriously half naked the entire time?
Yes. Okay. So that was one of the things I found to be I thought was kind of interesting is that like she just looks out of place. Like she looks compared to like
Yeah.
how modestly everybody else is dressed in that game, she just looks like she got dropped in from a different game. Which, you know, it's fine. I mean, she's a charming character. She's a bit of a klutz, and she's kind of just, you know, kind of just whatever. But I think she's, you know, she does a good job of just like carrying, like, you know, the plot of the game.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you like what you think the pull of this is, because the Atelier franchise has been going on for almost 30 years now.
Yes.
There's like 30 games. They're broken out into like sub-series because each one kind of tackles a different gameplay loop and style. But the thing that was interesting was when this game came out, when I was researching, when you said you were playing this, the series as a whole, this almost 30-year series, like altogether sold like less than 5 million copies. So it's like, obviously there's some type of devotion with this fan base that's causing them to sell, because not a lot of game studios would pump out games that are going to only sell like 100,000 copies.
That's true.
So like, what do you think it is that's or I guess maybe I should ask instead, have you played any of the other games in the series?
I have. So, Atelier, the series kind of like got like this pretty big surge in popularity over the past few years because of a game called Atelier Ryza.
Yeah, it was Ryza 3 was the big one, right?
Yeah, Ryza 3 was the one that just came out, and that was, I guess, the supposed like cap of the trilogy. Atelier Ryza became very popular because of the main character you play as had let's say like her like pretty much like comically big thighs. Like it became to the point where like people were just like pretty much focusing on just like, wow, this character has thighs that are massive. And like that became just kind of like a running gag, and it ended up working because the game sold like more than I think any other game in the series at this point. And they decided to make 3 of them. But so I think that was when the series kind of became like a much more popular thing, and like people decided to go back and start playing these older games. Because honestly, I don't think that if Atelier Ryza did as well as it did, that this game would have ever even come out here.
There's a YouTube video called Evolution of Atelier Ryza's Thighs.
Yes, I've seen it. And it is...
Did you make it?
I did. God, you caught me. Yeah, and so I think that is why this game kind of, you know, is coming out now. I think that series has evolved a lot since, you know, this first game. So I think it's interesting to see like where this franchise all started. I think so. If you're a fan of like the newer Atelier games, I think this is like worth checking out. But also I think, you know, JRPGs have evolved a lot since this game came out. And I think that in a lot of ways, this game just feels very dated, despite the fact that I think that it looks nice and it has like a really cool look, and they did a lot of cool things to update it for now and make it more accessible to, you know, to new players. I mean, it's probably the most accessible game in the franchise just because it's very basic, and the gameplay loop is very like cozy, and, you know, not super, there's not a lot of urgency. It's not like Stardew Valley where you have to kind of just, you know, get everything done within the span of like a day.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, if you go back in time and you look at what it was competing against it was 97, right? You said,
yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's Final Fantasy 7. You know, these were big they were RPGs and traditional turn-based RPGs, but they were very like action focused. And this was definitely like against the grain at the time. That's probably how it initially kind of carved out its spot for itself.
I would agree with that for sure. And so it is, I like it. I just think that like a lot of like my criticisms with the game just come down to the fact that like, it's just been kind of, the gameplay loop is like, can get a little repetitive. Like you're just kind of like going out and collecting stuff to like make things and then, you know, bring it back. And a lot of these missions have time limits based on days. So like if you just like take too many days on accident, because you're not thinking of the fact that like every time you pick up an item, it just costs a day. I mean, then you can just like fail the mission or not even like get any reward for it. So a lot of that stuff feels just kind of like you're micromanaging like how many days it takes to do a thing. And that feels strange. the things they did add to this remake is make an unlimited like mode where there is no like set time limit, but it does lock out some of the content of the game. So I decided to just kind of start the game like with how they intended it to be played. Um, so, and I think just the combat is basic in a way that I was just like, this is really dull, and I'm assuming that it, hopefully branches out more like as you like progress in the game. But just like in the 5 or 6 hours I've played so far, it is pretty boring to the point where the game even adds like an auto mode where it just like it just does the combat for you. So, but yeah, I I like it. I don't know. I wouldn't say that I love it, but I'm enjoying my time with it. I don't think it's necessarily worth like. I don't think it's worth $60 or not $60. It's not worth $50. So I think of it. I mean, if you're a fan of the Atelier series, I think it's worth it in that regard to check it out. But I'd also say probably wait for a sale where it's about 30. So, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I would say I recommend it, but I'm not sure if I would, I would say wait for a sale.
Yeah.
But
all right, we're back. Weird edit there. We Jitsi just completely freaked out on us. So that was that you wrapped up pretty much everything you want to say about Atelier Remake, right?
Yep.
Okay. What else have you been playing?
Okay, so the other game I decided to check out is it is a game called Gravity Circuit. This is a 2D Mega Man X style game. I would say it is extremely Mega Man X style in a way where I'm just like, I mean, there's so many games like this that come out, like the whole like we're gonna make a game that's just like Mega Man X with like the pixel art and everything, and like so this very much is another one of those. But so it is available on it's on PC, Switch, PS4 for it's $22. It's a little cheaper on PC. It's $16.99 on PC. It is the first game from a studio called Domesticated Ant Games, which that's cool. I like the name of that. It's a cool dev name. But so it is so the main thing that makes this game different from Mega Man X is the fact that you don't have a Mega Buster equivalent. So it's literally all melee focused. So when you start the game, you're giving a grappling hook. You're giving like you're able to run and you're able to grab, and you also have a lot of your melee, like your melee punches and stuff are all like input based. So you can like press like punch and up, and you'll basically do like an uppercut, or you can like do basically like drop kicks and stuff like that. So that's the thing that kind of really like differentiates it from from Mega Man X, is that there are no projectile moves. But so I've played about like 1 or 2 hours of the game, and so the game starts out pretty much exactly like Mega Man X, is that like it just kind of like sends you through like the level and like explains like the basic setup of the story, and you fight a boss, and then you're literally brought to like a small hub world where you're given the option to fight like 8 different like boss characters essentially. So the main story of the game is that you play as a character named Kai, and he is the Gravity Circuit. So his origin story is basically that you are one of 9 different like guardians that were created to protect Earth from like this virus army that came through, and like all of the virus army came through and basically wiped out everyone on Earth and all the other guardians except for you, but you were severely damaged. So like the citizens of Earth decided to like come together and like keep you alive. And so you wake up probably like, it doesn't exactly say like how much time later, but you wake up a good chunk of time later, and it turns out that all the other 8 guardians that like were alive at the time have also since been like repaired and have gone rogue. So you're kind of tasked with like going through and taking them all out, or for whatever way. So the game is like exceptionally difficult in a way that like, every Mega Man X game is also incredibly difficult. That's just like, that's how those games operate. But I think the visuals are outstanding. I think the soundtrack is has a really good like synthwave flair to it. I think it's excellent. And I think it does a really good job of, for how many of these like Mega Man X inspired games are out there. This is probably, I would say, the best one I've played in probably years. Like I play a good chunk of these games because I'm a big Mega Man fan, but like I was really pleasantly surprised with how well this game plays and how like, all the action feels tight, the jumping feels great, like all the mechanics there are very solid, and I'm very impressed with it. This game kind of like it bums me out because I feel like 0 people are talking about or playing this game, and that's a real shame because I think it's like a really good one of those. And I think for that reason alone, it's definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of Mega Man X. And I want more attention drawn to this game. I think I really want more people to play it because it does so many things well. And it's not like there are a lot of releases coming out right now. Like it's not like everybody's like busy playing Exoprimal. So like I think this game deserves a lot more attention. And I think I'm really, really enjoying my time with it. So I would highly recommend checking out Gravity Circuit if you're into that type of game. For sure.
Yeah. So as someone who also played Gravity Circuit,
oh, you did?
I did. I played some of it last night. So,
nice.
I think there hasn't been a lot of marketing behind it. It doesn't look like, it seems like it's selling well. I think it was in the top 10 on Steam on its launch day, I think.
Okay.
I think the game plays fine. As I grew up playing Mega Man, and I was actually really surprised how much. I mean, it really is just a love letter to Mega Man. I mean,
100%.
It really is. I would say almost too similar to Mega Man X to a fault.
Yeah. The similarities there are massive, aside from like the combat. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the combat being melee based instead of like projectile based, which actually it works in its favor because there are some interesting things you can do. I ended up getting into a big strategy of, I think it's down and attack will do almost like this pogo stick.
Yeah. Yep.
Type thing. And I was able to just kind of bounce on enemies while dodging projectiles from other enemies and kind of doing that. There's that kind of weird thing where when you do your kind of combo and finish an enemy, they turn red and then kind of explode. Right. And you can like kind of keep attacking them after you're kind of done attacking them. That was it threw me off a little bit, but once I was like, oh, okay, whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, because like once they turn gray, you can like grab them and throw them. Yeah. That's kind of like but it doesn't really do a good job of like explaining that to you once it,
Yeah, I think one of the things that really underplays is how useful the grappling hook is as an attack.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because there's like some shielded enemies that you could break their shield from a distance with the grappling hook and then get in closer to attack them.
Yes.
There were a few times, and maybe it was just because, an Xbox controller isn't the greatest, controller for a precision kind of game like this. There were a few times where I felt like I was fighting with the controls a little bit. There's a couple of platforming sections where you have to run, jump, hit the grappling hook, swing, hit the grappling hook again, swing, land, and then kind of rinse, repeat. And there were definitely a lot of times where I just fell, over and over again. And,
it definitely took me a little bit of time to dial in the grappling hook. I was definitely fighting with the controls a little bit there and there. But I mean, eventually I got used to it. But yeah, even just like, there were definitely moments where it's like you have to do that slide tackle thing through like these like little tiny things. Like you have like a, there's like a very small window where like you're gonna get hit by a projectile if you miss it. So it's very, very difficult. I mean, which I'm all about, but like you're definitely fighting with the controls for the first good chunk of it. I agree.
Yeah, I think it's good though. I think it's definitely worth playing if you like that kind of retro style game, especially because like the last one that I feel got like a ton of attention and pretty much all of it was negative attention was Mighty Number 9.
Oh yeah.
And I think that this is definitely what more in line with what people who are interested in that game would want.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you want like just a straight Mega Man clone where you are using a projectile based combat system. I think that this is probably the better choice, you know, for people that are interested in stuff like this. I actually didn't know it was on those other systems. I thought it was PC only. So it actually might end up, you know, doing better than people think, you know, if it's got a ton of options. But I have not seen a lot of marketing for it. I didn't when I was gathering news this week for our new, you know, the news section. I don't think I saw any reviews. And granted, the game came out, I think, on Friday. But I figured Wednesday or Thursday there'd be reviews. And I don't think I saw any of them, but
last I checked, there was like 3 reviews and all 3 of them have been very positive, but
yeah, I'm going to check real quick. Let's see here. Yeah, it is no longer in the top sellers on Steam.
Oh, okay.
So that looks like it kind of dropped out. Let's see. Wow. Is it really? Just totally, it looks like it had that rush the first day, and then it doesn't even look like it's in the top 30 right now.
Wow,
that's a shame. You know, it would have been nice for them to do a little bit more marketing with it, especially with it being on sale right now. It's only $15. Is it on Steam? And I think 15 to 20 is a good, you know, that's a proper price point. For it. Yeah. I've never I don't think I've ever heard of the publisher for this game. Maybe that has something to do with the fact that it's not being
marketed.
Yeah, a lot of, so I'm looking at the publisher's other games. They all look like made up games.
Yeah.
Like they look, yeah. I mean, really, this Gravity Circuit's like the first game that looks like a legitimate game.
Yeah, everything else is just like a phone game or something.
That's what they kind of looks like. Very generic graphics. Like graphics, not like game graphics, but like their presentation and design for advertising. Sure. Everything looks very, very generic.
Yeah. That makes sense. But for being like the first game that they've put out, like this dev put out, I think it's a very impressive like first showing. And I think, they didn't really seem like they did enough to put this game in front of people and like make people know that it existed. And, but it seems like the people who are playing it are really, really enjoying it. And I'm curious if like anybody on like the Mega Man subreddits are talking about it, because it seems like this is a thing that they would like eat up. But I haven't looked at the Mega Man subreddits.
There's a Reddit thread, Reddit, people can say what they want about Reddit, but Reddit is great at aggregating things. And anytime a video game comes out, they do the review thread, which gathers every published review for a game. People can have a discussion about that game. You are still correct. Only 4 reviews, all positive. And then, but the discussion, I'm kind of just skimming through comments. Everybody in here has nothing but nice things to say about it.
Good.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where maybe it just ends up becoming like a sleeper kind of game, this year that, see what happens with it.
Ends up on Game Pass, who knows?
It would be an excellent game on Game Pass. It would be an excellent Game Pass game, I think. Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, that's what I've been playing. But I really, really enjoyed Gravity Circuit, and I hope that more people give it a chance. Yeah. But how about you?
All right. So this week I didn't have a ton of time to play stuff because I did it. So I guess the first thing I'll talk about was, so last night on stream, I played Red Dead Redemption 2. But I did it on PC. I did it with mods, and I ran into some problems. And also the other problem, me just being super tired. I couldn't stream for long. So if you want to check out that stream, I suggest starting halfway through it because apparently there's a mission in the game that I wanted to get past because it allows you to kind of, I won't get into the technical things, but you kind of have to do this mission in order for some of the stuff I wanted to do with the mods. Because, like most games, they gatekeep certain game mechanics until you finish, the initial missions or tutorials or whatever. And apparently with the mods, it bugs the mission out. So I actually had to shut the game down in the middle of the stream, uninstall the ability for the game to run the mods, boot it back up. We had to do the mission, shut the game down again, reinstall the script hooks so the mods could find itself into the game, and then we could go forward from there. But I'm really enjoying playing through Red Dead again. I said it last night. I don't know if I'm actually going to sit here at my desk and play through the entire game all over again. It's a 40 to 50 hour game.
Yeah, that game's super long.
but it's such a well-crafted world. There's just so many things to just kind of do in that game that it's a game that you just kind of get lost into. You know, it's one of those games where you can just kind of turn it on and go explore and just kind of make it what you want to make it that day. You know, you could go hunt, go fish, go do missions, go do the stranger quests that pop up, the dynamic missions and things like that. So it's just been nice to kind of exist in a game world that's just so well thought out and so well crafted. And, you know, that being said, it did definitely get into some madness last night. You started spawning bears in the middle of a bar. I filled the street full of snakes. You know, just started shooting ox onto the street. And
that sounds all right.
Yeah, I made it so that my gun shot fire and fireworks and explosions, and we were blowing up carriages and a whole bunch of stuff. At one point, I killed everybody in the area, so I was just by myself.
Awesome.
So that was, it was a good time, but yeah.
Sounds all right. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was just saying, so I'm curious as to like, so what were some of the other like mods that you were doing? Were you trying to like, were you having a lot of fun just like trying to break the game, or were you trying to,
that was the purpose kind of the stream last night. For me playing just by myself, I just wanted to play the game without limitations, if that makes sense. Not have to play X number hours of the game to really open it up, kind of just unlock all that stuff early. And then, like I said, just exist in the game world.
Yeah.
You know, just to, and like, so the mods that I installed, like there's one that like reworks the physics. So people fall in a more realistic way, die in a more realistic way. The animations are just heightened, like improved blood and extra blood and like stuff like that when you kill someone to make it a little bit more realistic. Like the blood will actually like splatter against the wall and just kind of like increase the immersion of the game. One of the more popular mods for it is something called cut dialogue. They had recorded all this dialogue that they ended up taking out of the game. And a lot of it's just kind of like Arthur, who's the main character, like his inner monologue in a way. Like he'll make comments about things that are happening. And a lot of it still is left in the game. But it definitely makes it kind of, everybody's a little bit more chatty. You know, you hear the enemies. It almost is like, did you play Last of Us 2?
I did not.
Okay, so in Last of Us 2, they really ramped up the way the enemies talk with each other. Like if you kill an enemy, you'll hear other enemies say like, "Oh my God, they got Jeff." Like it humanizes it in a way, right? So it doesn't get to that level, but it is like one of those things where you hear enemies like communicating with each other, like, "Hey, he's around the corner." Like it just kind of adds that immersion to the game. And that's what I was kind of trying to do. I did a couple of like graphical upgrade mods. I did a trainer mod, so you could just spawn whatever I want, change my hair and beard level whenever I want, change the time of day whenever I want, you know, stuff like that. And it's just removing limitations from the experience was kind of the ultimate goal with it.
Are a lot of these mods new? Or
no, it was actually kind of tough when I was trying to mod it, because I had to, the modding websites kind of just assume that these are ones that you already have. So they're not necessarily pushed to the forefront of the mod like database where you download them. So I actually had to go onto like YouTube and like look up like, okay, what are the 10 mods you need to get started with Red Dead and like that kind of thing. And just kind of made a list and went back and downloaded them.
Okay.
And there's like mods that will take, because they did Red Dead Online, and it'll just be like, take all the content from online, like clothing, accessories, all that stuff, and just put it into the base game.
Are people still playing online? Is that like,
I think they shut it down at this point. It never, they were hoping it was going to be like GTA Online, and I don't even think it made a fraction of what it did. I think it's done at this point.
Yeah. That's a shame.
Yeah. I think you could still access it, but I don't think they update it or do anything. I never played it. I played a little bit of the original Red Dead. They had like the multiplayer like thing where you could like kind of get together with like a small group of other people. I messed around with that a couple of times, but I mean, it wasn't like a fleshed out story thing like GTA Online was. But Red Dead is just, it's that time of year where there's not a lot coming out, and it's just like, hey, this is a good time killer.
Yeah.
The game was on sale. I feel like I've got my $20 worth of entertainment out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
So
when you played it originally, you played it on
Xbox.
Yeah,
actually, that was the last midnight release I went to.
Jeez.
Yeah, they actually did a midnight release for Red Dead 2.
I'm trying to think of if I've ever been to a midnight release.
I've been to a couple.
Have you?
Yeah, I went to the big one was I went to the Modern Warfare 2, the original Modern Warfare 2.
Oh yeah.
Midnight release. There was like 300 people there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was cool. I remember we had to get in line for hours. I mean, I think I got in line at like 7 p.m. or something like that. And and people were like going up and down the line, like taking like food orders and like running to get people food and stuff. And they were doing like giveaways at the store and, a whole bunch of stuff.
Sounds cool. Like, I mean, I miss little things like that. I feel like, in the age where, you can just get games digitally and stuff, I feel like it's less, there aren't a lot of like big, like major event releases.
No.
They're big releases, but they're not big enough to warrant like a midnight release.
They're not even at midnight anymore. I still get, when I pre-order games at GameStop, I still get the phone call saying, hey, you can come in when the store closes at 9 and get your game. So it's not even at midnight anymore.
That's a shame.
Yeah. But I mean, I went to the PS4 launch at midnight.
Oh, you did?
I did. I wasn't able to pre-order one. And so I stood in line at Best Buy and waited, and at about 11:30, they came out and said, this is how many we had. And I was close enough to the front of the line that I got one. And
wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's pretty lucky. Like, yeah. But yeah, midnight launches. I mean, I'm trying to think. I went to like a Black Friday, like midnight thing just to get like a thing that was like super cheap. But I think that's the only thing I ever did. But like,
I got dragged along against my will to like a Thanksgiving night Black Friday thing at Target, and that was just kind of sad. Just felt kind of gross. Sad. It just felt kind of gross.
Definitely.
Yeah. Beyond that, I played Exoprimal. Because somebody told me that they were going to play Exoprimal, so I was going to surprise them by playing it, which is what led me to play Gravity Circuit last night.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. It's fine.
I do want to check out Exoprimal at some point, but I was just like, I just saw Gravity Circuit, and part of me just wanted to really check it out, but I do want to play Exoprimal. So yeah, tell me about it.
So Exoprimal, that's kind of like the big release of the week. It's a Capcom game. It is available on Game Pass. And so that's where I picked it up. And leading up to the game, it was leading up to the game's release, it was kind of hard to tell, like, is this a single player game or is this a multiplayer game? Or is this like a multiplayer game that you can play single player or bots? Like, what is this game? And so when you start the game, you go through a tutorial and character creation and all this stuff. And during the tutorial, there's different classes of the suits. You're in these like exo suits. There's tank, healer, assault, and there's one other one. I can't remember what it is. And so there's these different, you choose, like, they're essentially like characters, kind of like Overwatch. Like the suits have different colors, they have names. And so during the tutorial, they force you to play one each of the 4 classes, so you can kind of figure out what you want to do. And the tutorial is pretty good. It teaches you all the different attacks and abilities of each class, because they are the same for each class. And then it spits you into this like CGI cutscene story thing that any other game would have, and typically multiplayer games like this would not have. And for the first hour and a half, you are playing by yourself with named characters in the story mode, and it really is like, is this a multiplayer game? Like, there's no menu for me to go and play multiplayer. There's no menu at all. It just launched me into this. And I was like, that's really odd. So I go through and I play the tutorial missions and all this stuff. And then the story basis for how it becomes multiplayer is you are transported in time, and you are conducting essentially a series of experiments. Okay. So that's like what it is. It's like the AI is watching people do these battles, I guess, in the past to figure out how to solve the problem in the future.
Okay.
So it's like you're stuck in this like time loop kind of thing.
Interesting.
But at one point you come back to present day. So you willfully go back in time. Like you have this crew, like your character, and then there's this like crew on this ship, and you talk to them, and you have cutscenes and all this stuff, and then it's like, okay, I guess I'm going back to fight dinosaurs now, like that kind of thing. So the main mode of the game, which I think is called Dino Battle, I think is what it is. Okay. It's you and 3 other people, or maybe it's 4 other people. I can't remember if it's teams of 4, teams or 5. And you're up against another team of 4 or 5, but you don't fight them directly. You see them silhouetted on your screen. Because you're in the same like map. So you see them, but you can't interact with them. Like if you were to run, you would run through them if you were to approach them. And so the game sections you off. Like it gives you a waypoint on the map, and you go to this waypoint, and then you see like these like holographic borders appear. Okay. And that shows you like, okay, here's your tiny little confined areas for you to fight in. And then these portals open up in the sky, and the AI will say, okay, I'm spawning raptors. Okay, I'm spawning a triceratops, and the portal will open and dinosaurs come flying out, and you fight the dinosaurs, and you're trying to kill them as quickly as possible. Once you kill them, those holographic borders go away, and the waypoint pops up for where you need to go next. And then it will say, you are completing this game faster than the opponent, or you are completing this game slower than the opponent. Okay. And so you continue on until you get to the very end. Then there is this like crate, very much like the minecart thing in Overwatch. And you have to stand next to it for it to go forward on its path. Typically somebody will just jump on top of it, and that will force it to obviously go forward. And then you can, if you're doing well enough, you can then spawn like big dinosaurs into your opponent's game. Like in the first game I played, we were doing so poorly that the opponent spawned a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it just destroys you. Like it's like 2 hits and you're done. And it's a long respawn. It's like 15 seconds to respawn. You can heal a character. You approach them, hold a button, and a little gauge fills and brings them back. But when they do that, it's so overpowered. I mean, you lose all progress, and it spawns you far away from the objective. So now you have to run back to where you were to pick up again. And then when you get to the final section, then the other team spawns in, and you are attacking them, and they are there. Okay. And so it's really weird. So it's player versus player, but not in the traditional sense. It really is player versus environment in a race against the other player.
And then like the race ends with you fighting the other team.
That's how it happened every game I played so far. I don't know if perhaps if you were so far ahead that they weren't at that same part of the map, that maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. But every game that I have played has been, so there's a percentage, you'll say like you're 98% done with this match. And they've all been like, everyone that I played so far has been within like a few percentage points of each other. I haven't been on a lopsided victory or defeat. Okay. So it's odd. I've never played anything like it. Like I played, kind of Overwatch, I guess, but I ended up just kind of playing like the team deathmatch mode in Overwatch. Like that's the closest, that objective based mode is like the closest analog I can think of. It plays fine. Yeah. It's a little twitchy on the stick sensitivity by default, but you get used to it pretty quick. You have, I played the assault class. You have a machine gun. You fire that, reload, fire, reload. You have they call it a rifle grenade, which is essentially just like a grenade launcher kind of thing. Okay. And these are all on cooldowns. And then you have like a laser cannon thing that will just do like a straight line. So like the grenade will do like splash damage. And then you have this laser cannon to do like a straight line. And they're on like a 15 or 20 second cooldown. And then you have an ultimate ability that I think is on a minute cooldown. Okay. I think. And so, I mean, it's not bad. I thought it was going to be absolutely awful. Like I thought it was going to be terrible, like a laughing stock, but it's really not that bad. The issue with it is, as it stands right now, I don't think it has legs. Like,
Yeah, that's kind of my concern.
I don't see people playing this in a year.
Yeah.
Like that's and they're planning on it. There's like battle passes coming. There's already a shitload of cosmetics that you can buy, and people are buying them. The very first multiplayer, that game came out on Friday. I think it hits Game Pass our time, like 1 p.m. I have it downloaded. I play the game at midnight that night. So we're, I don't know, 6, 7, however many hours after, was it 10, 11 hours, whatever. There were people that were running around like Ghost Rider heads, like on fire and like all that. I was like, holy shit. Like, so there are people that are like definitely spending their money on this thing already.
Okay.
So, I mean, maybe it carves out an audience for itself.
I guess I'm just a little bit confused as to like who this is for, like who are they trying to go after with it? Because I mean, it feels like it's got some like elements of like, Monster Hunter in there, but like at least in terms of like,
because it's not like a singular. It's not like a singular enemy you're going after.
Oh, sure, yeah,
it's always giant hordes of dinosaurs, highlighted by like one large dinosaur that you have to take out.
Okay.
So it's like a cooperative thing. I know that there are games like this out there. I've just never played any of them.
Oh yeah, like Hunt Showdown.
Yeah,
like,
so to me, this is like a brand new experience. And it's definitely very novel. And it's like, okay, I could see myself playing this.
Sure.
Like I didn't, it held my attention long enough to play for several hours, on Friday night. But it's so story heavy. There's so many cutscenes that it's like, if you didn't know and you downloaded this off Game Pass, for the first couple of hours, you would think this is a single player game.
Yeah.
It's not until like, and then like all of a sudden it switches. Like all of a sudden you're just like, here's a menu with like options and clans and battle passes. And it's like, oh shit. Okay. Like it's so weirdly presented. But I mean, it doesn't feel like a budget game. It feels like they put time and effort into this game. Like it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't, I can't say that it's lacking because it's what it sets out to be.
Sure.
It's a very odd thing, but I think the thing that's their best decision that they did with this game was put it on Game Pass, because now there's very little financial risk of trying it. And I think there are going to be people like me that thought this game was going to kind of be like a joke. And then they download it and you're like, oh, there's actually some meat on the bones here. Like this actually isn't that bad.
Yeah. Cause this is a $60 game. My understanding.
I think so. Yeah.
So like, I think the only way for this to like, get any kind of traction, I think would be for it to be a Game Pass game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very curious about it. It seems, I think aesthetically, I think it seems very goofy. Do you feel like the story takes itself pretty seriously, or is it kind of goofy?
There's really no like humor.
That's kind of surprising.
A little bit, like each one of your crew is very much a trope.
Sure.
Definitely derivative of like anime. Sure. Like there's like a doctor who, like, even in appearance looks very close to the guy from Metal Gear. There's the very large black man, very much in the line of from Final Fantasy VII. And like even like Big Bo from Binary Domain.
I was hoping you were going to mention Big Bo.
Yep. And then there's like the hard-nosed Russian lady that of course has red hair. So I mean, these are like tired tropes that we've seen for the most part. And your character speaks. I was actually very surprised that your character does speak. Not much, but does say things. I figured you were going to be a silent protagonist, but yeah, you're definitely not.
That's cool. Yeah, I was kind of hoping for this to be a little, just the idea of like a multiplayer game where you fight a bunch of dinosaurs. I was kind of hoping it would lean into the goofiness of its concept, but
the gameplay itself is definitely goofy. The story, the cutscenes are not, but the gameplay 100% is. With there's like this overpowering AI, which of course is called Leviathan, and which manifests itself in this giant towering figure. And because you start off in like the digital realm, like while the game is loading and it's talking to you, and then you go out. But I mean, yeah, it's literally like, I'm going to, the AI literally says, I'm going to send a Triceratops now, and just a big butthole in the sky opens out and out poops a Triceratops, and it just, now you have to fight it.
Terrific. Game of the year. No.
Last year was a down year. I could see this crack in the top 10 last year. Last year was garbage shit. Elden Ring and God of War. Who wants to fucking play that?
Oh, dare you? Yeah. Neon White was a pile of shit.
Neon White was all right.
I love Neon White.
I fucking hated 50% of Neon White. I just wanted to play the game. I did not care about anything else.
Yeah, the story got real cringe.
They needed to have a version of that game where it's just like, here's just the levels.
I'm with you there. I think that would have been a smart choice because at some point, even the story for me got to the point where I'm just like, skipping through it because I was just hammering
on that button to skip every piece of dialogue in Neon White. I just wanted to play the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So the last thing is actually not a game, but game adjacent. Mm-hmm. And so last year, when I started doing this YouTube channel again, the first video I put up was about Immortality, which was my game of the year last year. Mm-hmm. And in that video, I said, if any game out there deserves to have an in-depth documentary, especially a Noclip documentary, it's Immortality. This past week, Noclip announced and released their Immortality documentary, which is pretty much feature length. I mean, it's just shy of an hour and a half.
That's awesome.
And so they are like on set with them interviewing. They interview pretty much all the major figures. They get the majority of the cast together, the director of the game, producer of the game, but then they also talk to the two women that did like the costume design and all that stuff, as that played a huge role, especially because they both got nominated for BAFTAs, which are essentially your British Oscars for the game. It's a fantastic documentary. Immortality wasn't just my favorite game of last year. I mean, it's one of my favorite games of all time now.
That's awesome.
And so to see this like super deep dive into it, and they just scratched the surface with this I mean, you could probably make a 10-hour long documentary because they didn't talk to any of like the script writers or anything like that. It would have been nice to maybe get into the actual writing, but they really focused on the acting and like the design essentially of the game.
Do you feel like it's safe to watch for people who have not played the game yet, or do you feel like
it will spoil elements of the game? Okay. Not everything, but it will spoil elements of the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious because I would like to. I think it would probably be better for me to play the game before I watch.
You would want to play the game before.
Okay.
You could finish the game in about. I think I finished it in about 7 hours, and then 12 hours was when I unlocked everything.
Okay.
But yeah, I got credits at about 7 hours or so.
Okay. Is this game still on Game Pass, or is it okay?
Yeah, it's still on Game Pass.
Would you suggest playing it on PC?
No, absolutely not. Vibration is a key mechanic. And if you don't have a controller that's vibrating, it would make the game much, much more difficult to play.
Okay.
Because I started on PC and I could not figure out how the hell to play the game.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because when you're on PC, instead of having the vibration, you have audio cues. And for me, if you're listening to people talking, you might not necessarily hear those audio cues. So having the actual vibration of the controller it's way better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I cannot recommend this game enough. It's such an incredible game, and I'm glad that it got a documentary done about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, you can always trust Noclip to come through with documentaries like that. A lot of the stuff I've seen them do for game documentaries have been just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I've probably watched a dozen of them or so at this point. They do really good work. All right. So before we take our break and get into the news, I had a question for you based off, this has nothing to do with video games, but I'm going to put you on the spot here. This is based off a text message you sent me earlier this week, where you asked me Well, you brought up that you started diving a little bit into the world of professional wrestling. And as a longtime professional wrestling fan, what are your intentions with my John Cena? Are you going to have him back from your date on time?
Yes, I will. Yeah. So I mean, I've talked to you about wrestling, in fits and starts throughout the years. Like I've always had like an appreciation for wrestling that I just never dove super far into it. I've always just thought it was really a lot of fun to watch. And I remember when we the two wrestling events that we've gone to have been just we went to the WWE one and we went to the AEW one.
Yep.
And I don't know if we ever went to an indie one together.
No, not together. No.
Okay. But the more I check out some sort of wrestling adjacent content or just like wrestling clips or whatever, I'm always just like, I need to watch more wrestling because this is all just like a lot of the stuff is just so ridiculous in a way that I'm like really into. And like, I mean, so I guess I would need more direction on like where to start.
Yeah.
Honestly, just because I need to, I don't want to just like cherry pick all the good stuff. I want to just like, just dive into it and, know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think the thing about wrestling in 2023 is that there are so many options out there, and there's always been options in wrestling, but they haven't always been the easiest to watch unless you lived in the area and you can attend in person. But pretty much every wrestling company, from the smallest ones to the biggest ones, the biggest ones are obviously on television, but I mean, everything else is pretty much live streamed now. And there are services out there, like Fight TV. I think it's like $8 a month and you get access to like 60 different companies' shows. And you can just watch them whenever you want. It basically just you can watch them live, obviously, or, it gives you just a giant archive that you can dig through. So, I mean, that's the thing is like you can figure out what you want because there's wrestling that's all comedy based. There's wrestling that's very serious. There's wrestling that's hyper violent. There's wrestling that is the opposite of hyper violent. There are actually companies out there that are like specifically family friendly wrestling companies. And so it really is just kind of like whatever you want to find, you can find an option out there.
I feel like I've heard so many just stories or seen clips just out of context that were just kind of amazing that I'm like I remember there was like somebody like described like there was a wrestling match where there was just like a giant panda in the ring. And I'm like, I need to hop on this. I mean, this is obviously, I'm pretty sure this was like I don't know if this was like a New World Japan thing, but like, I was just like, man, wrestling has gotten ridiculous in a way that I need to just like, I need to pick one of these things and stick with it just because, I don't know if I have the time to just watch all of WWE and all of AEW and just like keep up with it, but like,
yeah, you definitely don't have to. Yes, Japanese wrestling has always been very serious, but then the independent Japanese scene has always been ridiculously goofy and over the top. There's matches they rented a private island and had an island death match where they're like fighting in the ocean. There was Big Japan Pro Wrestling in either the late 90s or early 2000s. They built a house, like legitimately built a house. And then the wrestlers were put into the house and then just fought through the house. And at the end of the match, they had destroyed and torn down the entire house. Like it was like a 3-story, like 3-bedroom house. Like,
oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Like, all that sounds fantastic. Like, and it just means like, yeah, I need to dive into that. Cause wrestling is amazing. And I just never had, and that's one of the things I just never super dove deep into, but
yeah, I think it's, in any good friendship, there's always like the nice friend. And then there's the friend that's just trying to manipulate the other friend to try and warp them into what they want them to be, which is me.
Of course.
And my goal has always been, I'm going to get Davis either into professional wrestling or the NBA. And thanks to Charles Barkley, we're getting close to having you interested in the NBA.
That's right. And
with professional wrestling, like we're getting closer and closer to, I'm just going to push you off the edge there.
Perfect. I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah. We just got to get Charles Barkley to do wrestling.
Oh, please.
Which at one point would not have been a stretch because in the 90s, Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman both wrestled in WCW.
Ooh,
And so it would
nice.
not have been a stretch at one point in time for Charles Barkley to have a professional wrestling match.
Speaking of, did you know that that Shaquille O'Neal is a DJ?
Yes, DJ Diesel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to my tattoo artist about this, about like, how he's just like a pretty terrible DJ, but just like watching him perform is just so hilarious. And he's just such a massive dude up there. And like,
he has been blowing up a lot because his shows have like just a production value that a lot don't. And he's been headlining some like festivals.
Right.
And, yeah.
She was telling me, she's like, it was a pretty terrible set, but it was just so much fun. Like the music was like kind of beside the point.
Yeah.
He's just such a goofy DJ, and he just spends like half the time just like yelling into the mic, like, let me see you mosh pit, like all that dumb. It's so funny.
It didn't surprise me that he got in. I mean, obviously he did music in the 90s with the Shaq Fu stuff, but I mean, he started getting spotted in the crowd because he's hard to miss. But I mean, he started getting spotted in the crowd in like all these European like EDM festivals. Yeah. And like some big ones. I think he was at like Tomorrowland one year and stuff. And he was just he was just there like as a fan. And he's just watching this stuff. And then he would do like podcasts and stuff. And he was like, no, I'm like really super into like modern EDM and dance music. And then all of a sudden he was like, yeah, I'm just gonna start doing shows. And he started doing like these like club sets in Miami and stuff. And then next thing you know, he's doing like these big festivals around the world. And it's just like, fucking go for it, man.
Yeah. Good for him. I love that for him. That's just you'd never guess, but I don't know how he finds the time to be DJ Diesel and also do Inside the NBA. Like, I don't know how.
Well, Inside the NBA is 1 day a week for.
Oh, is it 1 day?
Yeah, it's 1 day a week for 5 months out of the year, and then they also take breaks a lot of the time. So I mean, it's not a super huge. Yeah, so they fly those guys into Atlanta. They get like a hotel the night before, then film the show, and then they fly back home.
Oh, okay.
Because none of them, I think only one of them lives locally to Atlanta, and the other guys live elsewhere.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. All right. So that will wrap up what we've been playing, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right. We are back with the news, and man, it has been a week kind of dominated by the Xbox court stuff going on. So this story has been evolving every day. It started on Tuesday when it was announced that Microsoft has won the battle against the FTC concerning the Activision Blizzard acquisition in the United States. This gives them permission to make the deal happen in every territory except for the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is their last hurdle. They have denied the acquisitioning from happening, which we'll get into with what is going to end up happening with that most likely. But every day this week, there was another story coming out about this because then the FTC said that they were going to appeal. And then on, let's see here, it was July 15th. So it was yesterday. So I think it was Friday. I think it was actually the 14th. That appeal was then denied. And then just this morning, it was announced that Microsoft has entered a binding agreement to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. So we'll kind of break this down a little bit because there's so many news stories. It's hard to kind of keep track of everything. But essentially, the long and short is that they won the decision, the trial against the FTC. The FTC could not make a compelling argument as to why this deal should not go through. And I think the main reason because of that was so often throughout their argument, it was all about how this affects PlayStation and what would be in the best interests of PlayStation. Well, the FTC is supposed to care about the best interest of the consumer, not the best interest of a multi-billion-dollar company. The judge, despite not being well-versed in video games, saw right through that. And that's ultimately why I believe it fell through. Then the topper on it was their appeal also got denied. So and I think it's, and I'll ask you your opinion on this in a moment, Davis, but I think what it ended up being was they never actually proved whether or not this decision is bad or good for consumers. In terms of Microsoft acquiring Activision, they only proved that they could not come up with a compelling argument, and they oftentimes looked unprepared, and mention things that made zero sense. And B, they didn't actually do what they're supposed to do. They only talked about, they hinged their entire argument on Call of Duty being the most important thing in the world.
Right.
And anybody that plays video games knows that it just isn't. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, are you surprised that Microsoft kind of just blew right through this and it didn't ultimately end up being an issue?
I think that, I guess I'm a little confused as to why the FTC would be, so the FCC's argument, my understanding is that they thought this would be like, this would negatively impact consumers because of,
it would create a monopoly.
It would create a monopoly. Yep. Yes. Okay. So the FTC's argument is that this would create a monopoly, and that, but most of their argument was hinging on the fact that like Call of Duty is like the most profitable thing, and that like Microsoft is going to be, so is that Microsoft is going to make it so that Sony somehow like, is going to get like a worse version of the game, or they're going to like stop selling it on PlayStation just to like,
yeah, Sony's argument was that the loss of Call of Duty would be so detrimental to their business that it would create like an unfair, essentially monopoly in the video game industry.
Okay. I guess I'm confused as to like why they thought that like they were automatically just going to make Call of Duty an exclusive game, because it doesn't really seem like they were making a compelling point that was even because Microsoft, it seems like all along has stated that was going to happen. Like it would make no sense for them just to decide to like not put their game in as many places as possible.
Yeah. So, that's one argument. I think so. I think there's a couple of sides to that point of view. One is, yes, that is a very valid argument. Like, why would Xbox want to remove a very popular game from all these platforms and make a lot less money? They certainly didn't do that with Minecraft. Minecraft is still available on other platforms. The other side of that, though, is that some of the language that they were using was they kept saying, we will continue to put Call of Duty on PlayStation 5. Oh, not PlayStation 5. So when PlayStation 6 comes out, does that mean no more Call of Duty? So that was like a big argument that Sony had. And then Sony, it also kind of came out that it looks like, because Sony, obviously Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, any video game platform, they get a cut of sales. So if you buy a skin in a game, they're getting a cut, right? Because you're using their platform to facilitate that transaction. And it came out that the money generated by Call of Duty for the Sony platform is greater than the revenue generated by all of Sony's first party games.
Wow.
Yes. That's so huge. It would be a big financial hit. Now, would it be a financial hit to the point that Sony would cease operations as a company and no longer be able to make PlayStations? No, that's not going to happen. And I think one of the things is that if this case was happening 7 years ago, or even further than that, or maybe even a little bit more recent than that, Call of Duty was in a really rough spot where sales were really in the toilet. And eventually they pulled themselves back out. I think this is only happening because Call of Duty is relevant again to mainstream video games.
That's true. Yeah. I think just like to look at this case and say like, that like Call of Duty is, yes, Call of Duty is still one of the biggest franchises in the world right now, but for them to just say, to put so much weight of like, on this case on just one game franchise is a little, I think it's a little. They put
all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly,
100%.
Yeah. I think that's very, I can see why it would be hard for them to make a compelling argument, in that regard, like in terms of like how this is going to like completely, like this is not going to destroy Sony. Like that's not, so to kind of like, it seems like they're trying to make the argument that this is going to be like, this anti-consumer thing, but it really just is. I'm struggling to understand, like to connect the dots there, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's, I certainly can see the viewpoint of, where video games are getting more and more in line with television and movies, where there's just a few major companies that act as an umbrella that have these smaller companies underneath them. Right. Disney has bought so much, You know, Disney went from just having their library, which classic movies, yes, but Disney wasn't making, it's not like they were making a million movies a year, you know, to then very quickly in the span of just a few years, well, now we own Marvel. Now we own Star Wars. And now we own Fox. You know, like they amassed this like empire in a very quick amount of time. And it's the same thing with television. You know, Universal owns NBC, which is, you know, a broadcast television network, but they also have Universal Pictures and all their subsidiaries and all that stuff. And like when you really boil it down to kind of like a dystopian point of view, it's like you're getting all of your entertainment from like one of 10 sources, like that kind of thing, you know.
That's very true.
So I get that, you know, having a monopoly in video games would definitely not be great. But from the other side of things, Activision is such a poorly run company.
Oh,
they have absolutely. A horrible human being in charge in Bobby Kotick.
Yes. Well, Bobby Kotick is
They've had protests by their workers, strikes by their workers, allegations of sexual assault in the workplace, sexual discrimination in the workplace, just toxic work environment in general, and all this stuff. And you could say what you want about Microsoft as this gigantic, they are $1 trillion company. Microsoft's not going to put up with that shit. Like, this is probably the best thing for Activision.
Yeah, that's true. Considering, like all the toxicity around that company, like, I think, you know, this benefits Activision to, like, you know, be, you know, bought out by people who are actually, you know, who are not gonna, you know, we're gonna try to like course correct, I guess, wherever Activision is going right now. But like, it's the whole like this whole court case has been such a strange thing. It almost seems like it was kind of like they had no case to begin with.
It was like, so thin. I mean, it really was. There was reporting from, I want to say it was The Verge, where they were doing like a blow by blow of like essentially like almost like what the stenographer would be doing, like the transcript of what was going on. And I read through some of it, and it's just like, it's all these people in this room besides the people representing Microsoft, and some of the people on Microsoft's side, you know, fall into this category. Nobody knew anything about video games. And it's fine to not understand how to play a video game, not have video games in your life. But if you are representing a video game interest in court, you better do some research.
Seriously.
You better hire some fucking millennials to come in there and like give you a crash course on the way things work, you know?
Yeah, like how are you going to make a case, you know, and like to people who just do not understand video games or like how they work or like how this industry is, you know, that was the most shocking thing to me of just like this how can it would take so long just to like explain how video games like operate and how the business is functioning today.
Yeah.
You know, that I think I completely agree that they needed people who knew more about video games to like kind of,
you know, and that's not unheard of. That's why there are things called expert witnesses.
Right.
You know, there are people that's their whole job is that they freelance as expert witnesses for court cases.
Yeah.
And like, you couldn't put something together. You're the FTC. Like, you couldn't put something together. You're up there talking about Thor of War and fucking Elder Scrolls 16 coming out next year. And it's just like, all right.
I forgot about Thor of War.
Yeah, it's like, all right.
That killed me when I first read that.
It's
amazing.
like, okay, all right, man. You know, whatever.
Thor of War.
So, the last hurdle obviously is now England. The UK has flat out denied this. They have said that this is not going to happen. The European Union has passed it. So the rest of Europe, everything is good to go. The rest of the world, everything is good to go. It's just UK. So these very sad reality of what is most likely going to happen for the residents and video game players of the United Kingdom is that when these games, all the Activision games hit Game Pass, they're just not going to be available in the United Kingdom. So now you're going to get a lesser quality product for your money.
Yeah, that really stinks. That just doesn't seem, that's really unfortunate for like the people of, you know, because that feels more anti-consumer of just like, that's really a shame.
Yeah, I mean, they could still pull through. They could still work out a deal with the United Kingdom.
I'm sure, yeah.
And figure out a way to make this work.
Yeah. It almost seems like how much money do we have to throw at this to make it go away?
Yeah. Or if they want to be giant assholes about it, they could just be like, okay, cool. Well, you can't buy Windows anymore in England.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be. Oh, that would force their hand more than anything.
Yeah.
Like,
See, if I was in charge of Microsoft, it's probably a good idea why I'm not.
yeah.
You're like, we're taking away Windows, taking away Solitaire,
Yeah.
taking away all that shit you like.
It's like, yeah. Go use Linux, I guess.
Yeah.
It sucks to be you.
Also, we're buying Linux and you cannot have Linux.
Perfect.
So yeah, I mean it's interesting. The last thing we'll touch upon, just because the news did announce this morning, is this binding agreement to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. This story is coming from Jordan Midler from VGC News. So it says little is known about the terms of the agreement or how long it will last, but it puts to bed one of the biggest hurdles in Microsoft's prolonged acquisition of the Call of Duty publisher. The president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, says, quote, "From day one of this acquisition, we've been committed to addressing the concerns of regulators, platform and game developers, and consumers. Even after we cross the finish line for this deal's approval, we will remain focused on ensuring that Call of Duty remains available on more platforms and for more consumers than ever before." There was some rumor going out that this is a 10-year agreement, but there does not seem to be any confirmed validity to that statement as of right now. It's Sunday. Not a lot of people are working on Sunday. And hats off to VGC for doing this, because they're in England, so they're 5 hours ahead.
That's right.
So this is Sunday night, for them when this is happening. So they were really kind of right on top of things. But I mean, it makes sense financially. Why would you're going to start making money off this game being on PlayStation?
It's true.
Just leave it.
Yeah.
What does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, in a world where like every Xbox sold that has a disc drive in it still makes Sony money because of Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't think it's that like, I think it would not be smart for them to just decide like, we're going to take this game off this platform because, that just seems,
I ripped the Blu-ray drive out of my computer. I was like, fuck you, Jim Ryan. You're not getting any money from me.
That's right.
Replaced it with a floppy disk.
God, can you even get a floppy disk drive?
You can still if you wanted one, you could still get one.
Can you?
Yeah. Okay. My new case does not have space for that. I actually don't even know if this case has bays for traditional hard drives, like 3.5 inch drives. I don't even know if it has room in there for that. It might just for solid state, but there's definitely cases out there that you could still put a floppy disk drive in there. Sure. They make external USB ones too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. That's that's what I was thinking.
Shit, Thermaltake made a cigarette lighter for PCs. It just slid into one of your drive bays.
Awesome.
Yep.
Great. I'm glad that's a thing.
Yep. All right. So next on the list, a bunch of former Shadow of Mordor developers are working at a new studio called Cliffhanger Games, which is under the umbrella of Electronic Arts, and they have announced their first game, and it is a Black Panther game.
Okay.
So, the Marvel stuff has been kind of slow to come to the video game side of things. They had the disaster that was the Avengers game, the critical but not commercial, unfortunately, success of Guardians of the Galaxy. And when that studio was sold, they told them up front, you're not making a sequel, which I think was very sad. That game was really well made, really well done. And I think a second shot, they would have fixed a lot of the problems that people had with that game. And I think that would have been huge.
I think the fact that game, the reason that game was not successful was almost completely at fault. So not completely at fault, but like a good chunk of fault was because of the Avengers game and how that turned out. Yeah.
And also, I don't think the marketing was super strong on that game. And I think, in fairness, it doesn't have, just like the Avengers game, it did not have the likenesses of the actual film actors. So no Batista, no Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, et cetera, et cetera. But with Black Panther in particular, this brings up a really interesting question with this, is because the Marvel movies are down. People are not going out to see them the way they used to do it. The majority of the main cast is now gone, either because their character has died in the universe that they have, or they're like, even with like Scarlett Johansson, there's like contract disputes because she hated the way that her movie was handled. Like she's probably not going to ever come back, to Marvel. And this is a way through video games for them to keep these very popular characters going.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's not going to be, unfortunately, Chadwick Boseman, who played Black Panther, passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's going to be a different voice actor, but they can keep that character alive.
Mm-hmm.
And who's to say that, at some point somebody takes another swing at the Avengers game, right? And gets those characters and shells out a ton of money and tries to get some of those actors in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's an interesting pivot for Marvel to try and keep some of these characters going, because there's an Iron Man game coming out as well.
Right. Yes.
And so I think it's I think it's a smart thing for them to do. And especially, Shadow of Mordor was really well received. There are a lot of people that didn't like Lord of the Rings that like those games.
Yeah.
And to have them, that's a pretty good pedigree to start with this, because a lot of these big budget superhero games have been pretty bad.
Yeah, definitely.
Because
go
ahead.
I'll say I guess my question is, do you think they would, I mean, it's the company that made Shadow of Mordor. They put a copyright on that like Nemesis system, and that hasn't appeared in any of the games. It's patented. That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And so I'm curious if does that mean if it's patented, they wouldn't be able to put it, the devs from this team would not be able to put it in this game?
Okay. So interesting thing. So the guy that was the lead on those games is no longer working over there at Monolith. He is now, according to his Twitter bio, at EA.
Oh.
So my best guess is that they are going to develop a very similar system that skirts around that patent in some way. Because they say in this article here, let's see here, there was a quote, I wish I could find it, that there was wording in a quote that made it seem like I think it was said like dynamic enemies or something like that. Okay. And that's like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge of like, it's dynamic because, it's going to be similar to that Nemesis system. Because the last I heard, we haven't seen anything about it, but there's a Wonder Woman game apparently being made by Monolith that's going to have the Nemesis system in it.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
The game got announced like a long time ago. But then the last Wonder Woman movie bombed at the box office.
It did, yeah.
The DC stuff is all torn apart at this time. And DC has that new order saying that if you're going to make a video game based upon a DC property, it has to have the same likeness and voice as the actor portraying them in the film version.
Really?
Which I think is why Injustice 3 is not happening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that when Warner Brothers said that they were looking at selling their games division, and that if we sell, you might not be able to have the licenses that you currently have. I think NetherRealm was like, well, then fuck that. We're just going to make another Mortal Kombat then. Yeah,
that's true. That's a really strict, I guess, stance to take on just being having their likenesses and stuff. That just seems, that limits the possibility of so many games that could be made. And that's just not, you'd think that they would just want to be able to make as many superhero games as they could, but that's crazy to me. I mean, I guess everybody has to, people have to make money, I guess, but that's still just bonkers to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a super huge superhero person, but
me neither.
If they can make a good superhero game where you're doing these over the top powers and abilities and really pull it together, that can be very fun from a gameplay perspective. And it kind of goes past I don't really have a connection to this character, but this game is so good that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, what you said, it's a very delicate franchise at this point because the original actor who depicted him passed away. So I'm very curious how they're going to handle making this game, because it's still a very delicate thing for, a lot of people. And I'm curious how they're going to tackle that stuff. But I think, there's a lot of potential for that game to, that character. And I think that my understanding is that Wakanda Forever movie did pretty well.
I think that's one of the few recent-ish Marvel movies that did. I think that did well. The last Guardians movie did well, but I think the last Ant-Man did not. I know Eternals performed very poorly. But that was also, I think that was a pandemic movie. as
I believe it
well.
was, yeah.
So I think there was still probably not a lot of people going to the theaters at that time, because they ended up with Black Widow. They just put it on Disney Plus. They ended up abandoning
That's right.
that. But I actually, because I never really watched any of those Marvel movies, a couple here and there. I remember before they really started the whole universe, you know, I saw like the first 2 Iron Man movies when they came out, but I actually ended up earlier this year, I went through and I watched all of them. And some of them, my opinion changed on some. I think they're better than I gave them credit for, but some of them are just awful movies, like just so boring and just so devoid of personality, considering that they're comic books that are supposed to be over the top. And, you know, it's just like some of them I was like falling asleep during.
Yeah. I mean, I guess a lot of those, I mean, over the few that I've seen, a lot of them just became very like samey to me. Like a lot of them was just like, everybody's like quipping all the time, and it all is just like it's all very, it got more and more CG heavy, and I'm like, these movies are fine, but like I don't know, they just at some point I was like, I've only watched a few here and there. Like I thought Thor Ragnarok was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that one. And I thought Black Panther was pretty good too. I enjoyed that movie.
I think the thing that was the most telling for me is once I finished watching all of them, and when I was done, I felt absolutely zero desire to then continue like keeping current as new ones were coming out.
Oh yeah.
Like I was like, I'll see one if it interests me, I'll rent it when it comes to rental, or eventually when it comes to Disney Plus, I watch it. I did not feel any desire to like, oh, I've got to go to the theater to see this thing on day one. You know, it just, I don't know.
That's fair.
Yeah,
definitely.
They're fine.
Yeah, they're fine. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, these movies are fine.
Yeah. But I think, we'll wrap up the story, but I think that even though they are fine movies, those stories and environments could make for incredible games. So if the right people are making them, you know, maybe they turn things around.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential for that franchise to make a really good game. It deserves a good game.
Yeah. Yeah,
definitely.
All right, so the next thing up is that a study has been completed by the Video Game History Foundation in partnership with the Software Preservation Network. Has claimed that 87% of classic video games released in the United States are what they are calling critically endangered. So the study shows this, they are talking about games released prior to 2010. That the example they use is the Commodore 64. Only 4.5% of Commodore 64 games are still purchasable in some way. For the entirety of all Game Boy games, original Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, only 5.8% you can still purchase. So yeah, those numbers are really small. And what they're saying is, you know, if these, you know, obviously you could probably go out and find the cartridges if you have the original hardware and play these games. But in terms of like being purchased like digitally or like an easily accessible way to get them, you know, it's 87% of games before 2010 are essentially endangered of being no way to play them anymore. Which is really interesting because the quote they use in this article, it says, imagine if the only way to watch the movie Titanic was to go to a store and find a used copy on VHS. You know, movies are very well preserved. You know, not so much with Blu-ray, but on DVD, like everything from VHS for the most part got put on DVD. There's obviously some fringe cases, but a lot of stuff got put out on DVD. And it's getting a little bit better with Blu-ray. There's some boutique places like Vinegar Syndrome that buy the rights to these obscure movies and put them out on DVD and Blu-ray. But the video game industry, they, you know, Nintendo especially, you know, is because they have the longest concurrent history right now for the most part, because Atari kind of had fits and spurts along the way. But Nintendo really just doesn't give a shit about its history. They just don't care. They aggressively go after people that are playing ROMs of games that they cannot buy. They're, you know, they cannot, I don't own a Switch. You do. So correct me if I'm wrong. But if I wanted to play Pokemon Yellow, I can't buy that digitally on the Switch, right?
No.
Yeah, so I would have to get the ROM.
Yeah.
But then they're going to sue me. And then they're going to sue the person that allowed me to download it from them. But they're not going to put it out and make money off of it.
That's right. Yeah.
It's so bizarre. And it's sad, you know, because these cartridges aren't going to last forever.
Mhm.
Even disc-based games, early press discs from the late 80s, early 90s, there's disc rot. There are games that just don't work anymore. They're not scratched or damaged in any physical way that you can see, but the data is just degraded to the point where they don't run anymore.
Which is crazy to think about. Like, but yeah, I think 87% is an absurdly high number. Like, that is just astonishing to me. Like, I understand that, like, a lot of people, I mean, and not to mention the fact that, like, the secondhand retro game market, as you know, as somebody, I mean, we've both worked in that industry for years. Like, the state of, like, retro game prices and collecting is dire.
Yeah.
Like, prices have gotten outrageous. Maintaining that old equipment has become, like, nearly impossible. Like, even getting a CRT in 2023 is like finding a unicorn. Finding one that's like fully functional, like, it is just not, it is not possible to play these games in their original, like, in the way they're originally, you know, meant to be played. So it kind of forces people to go the route of emulation and forces people to go the route of, I mean, playing these games any way they can. So I think if it would, if like finding a way to preserve these games and make them accessible to people, you know, would bring money in, you think it would incentivize them to do it. But I guess a lot of these companies are just kind of like looking forward, and they're just like, well, we're on to the next new thing. So, and like, I think especially, I mean, I think it's a lot of companies just are, well, I mean, it's gotten better over the years. Like, I think for a while it was just like, nobody wants to play old games. They just want to play the new stuff. Like, nobody cares about backwards compatibility. No one cares about like having access to these old games. But I think time and time again, that's proven to not be the case. Like, people want to have backwards compatibility, and they want to be able to play these old games. So I think it would behoove them to make these games more accessible, whether it's digitally or whether, I mean, whatever way they can, giving people the option to play these games, if that would bring money in for them. I mean, why wouldn't they do it? I mean, but so, and also just to like come down on people who are, you know, trying to emulate these games, which, you know, it's also important to remember that like emulation is not illegal.
Yeah.
So I think that I just think it seems like they just, it seems like a very like a skewed perspective on like of whether or not people want to play old games, because they very obviously do. And I think the fact that we're in such danger of losing a lot of these games to time is, it sucks. Like, I think it's just terrible. I think we should be able to like preserve these games and make them accessible, because like a lot of these games are just going to be lost to time, and they're important parts of history, you know? So I think we need to do more to be able to make these games accessible in any way we can. But
yeah, I think, you know, there's an argument to be made with a lot of older games where so many video game developers and publishers have gone out of business. That's like, if you did want to re-release these, like, who owns the rights? You know, there are situations where if there were like a licensed game, like then you would have to pay to renew the license, and the amount of money that you're going to have to spend to pay to renew the license, are you going to be able to recoup that when you release the game for sale? You know, there are a lot of hurdles, but it's just sad. Yeah. And to your point about how expensive buying the original versions of these games are, you know, I pulled up there's a game that always stuck out in my mind when it comes to that. It's Spider-Man Web of Fire on the 32X. I think, you know, it's been a long time since I've been involved with collecting video games or paying attention to the retro game market, but
yeah,
you know, I think it's probably still the most expensive 32X game. And I remember it was you and I both worked at the same independent video game store. Mm-hmm. And I remember at one point we had a boxed copy. The store used to have these like old kind of not carousel displays, but these rotating displays where the games would kind of slide in there for the cheap games that the store wasn't worried about somebody taking off and running. And for years, there was a copy of Spider-Man Web of Fire in there for like $4.99. And I didn't know any better. I was not collecting retro video games when I started working there. It wasn't until like a year and a half in that I actually started doing it, because I started working there right when the boom in retro collecting happened. So it wasn't really a thing when I first got into it. But I remember somebody finally bought the game. And then I don't know, however long later, somebody asked if we had a copy, and I was like, no. And I was like, let me see how much it is on eBay. So a box copy right now averages $1,700. A loose copy is about $550. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, does anybody actually want to play Spider-Man Web of Fire? No, not really. It's not. I've played it. It's not very good. Sure. But somebody does. Somebody wants to play it. Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to go out there and buy a $1,700 box copy or almost $600 loose copy? Like,
I hope not.
That's a PS5 and a couple of games.
Yeah.
You know, like it's.
Yeah.
You know what? You would think that Spider-Man is a popular enough character, because it is. That, you know, Spider-Man movies make a ton of money. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man comic books are selling fine.
Yeah.
Why is there here's a compilation of all the classic Spider-Man video games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why does that not exist? You know, there's no legal, easy way to purchase these games.
That's true.
And unless the video game industry as a whole decides that, like, we need to start doing this, because what's really the issue here? These companies that make billions and billions of dollars are worried about spending the money to have a small team port these games to modern systems. Like, really?
Yeah.
You know, it just comes down to like, well, I guess, what if we don't get our bonuses that quarter?
Yeah.
You know, like they're so concerned about the bottom line and their profit that these video game companies, unlike film, you know, the film industry celebrates itself so much. And I know this is an awkward time to talk about it because SAG-AFTRA is on strike and the writers are on strike, but by and large, the film industry celebrates itself. They have, you know, you can go and tour the Warner Brothers lot and learn about the history of the company. They very easily make a lot of these older movies available on streaming services or through television networks like Turner Classic Movies. The video game industry seems to just be ashamed of its history and does not want you to experience what came before. And it's a very small subset of publishers and developers that give a shit. You know, Digital Eclipse announced this week that they're going to start doing this thing called their Gold series, where they're going to take a game and they're going to port the game to modern systems and you're going to be able to play it. But then they're also going to film like a documentary around it and make it a whole big thing celebrating these important games. But that's one company and it's one game at a time. And how many could they theoretically get out?
That's true.
You know, so it's just such an odd thing, you know, like why don't these video game companies care about where they came from? And Nintendo specifically, man, if they put all those Pokemon games out on the Switch eShop, they'd sell like crazy.
Yeah, like crazy.
Like
people being, that's the game that I feel like people like want to go back and play the most, or like those Pokemon games.
Yeah.
Because like, the fact that they're just like, I mean, they did on the 3DS, they did that, but like also the 3DS is gone now.
Yeah,
so
they got rid of the shop.
Right.
It's all gone.
You can't go back and play those games. And a lot, I mean, I remember even said in this article that like when the eShop, like the Wii U and the 3DS eShop closed, like the access to a lot of these Game Boy games just like went down like significantly. So like, I don't know. They would do well to just, you know, make these games purchasable. And I think you could get people to do the work to like emulate these games and like, you know, bring them to modern consoles. Like, I feel like the amount of money it would cost to like port these games and like do the dev work versus like how much they're going to recoup that cost just from like people buying these games, I think I mean, I think it's worth taking the risk just to see how it pans out. Like, yeah, to your point, like, yeah, there's licensing issues and like that stuff is going to cost money and like having to go back and get a bunch of those, you know, I'm sure like having to just go get the rights to put that Spider-Man game on a compilation is like, that takes work and that takes money. But like,
well, I mean, Disney has a video game publishing unit. They can just publish it themselves.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
yeah, I just think that to your point, like that, I think that it's just the lack of like respect for like their old games, I guess, or at least, you know, to just assume that like no one wants to go back and play them. Like, granted, a lot of these games have probably not aged well, and like,
Sure.
it's some of them are super not worth revisiting. But I think just having the option to do it is so important, just from like a historical like preservation perspective, that they should just make these games accessible in some way, so you don't have to go the route of like pirating them or like emulate or whatever. Like, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of these game companies are so like, all their decisions are based on like how much money this is going to make us, and so it's just kind of,
what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. So.
All right. So the last story for this week is there's a rumor going around that The Last of Us Part 2 is going to get an update in some way. I assume that would just mean a PS5 port with maybe some polish or whatnot.
Sure.
Because that game, despite being very close to the launch of the PS5, there was no PS5 version of that game. So it is, it's still a previous gen game.
Did it get an update of any sort to like make it optimize on that?
No,
console?
I don't think so.
It did not? Okay.
But yeah, the composer of the game, Gustavo Santaolalla, said that an enhanced version of the game is in development. He talked about how they had him come back to do some work. And, it makes sense, because the counterpart to the story is that the Emmy nominations came out, and The Last of Us was nominated for 24 Emmy Awards. So I'm sure there's plenty of pressure being put on Naughty Dog from both Sony and HBO to get a PS5 version of The Last of Us 2 out there.
Yeah. I would say that, yeah.
Yeah.
Valid.
Did you, okay, so I know I asked you earlier if you played Last of Us Part 2. I can't remember if you said before. Did you watch the show?
I have not watched the show. Okay. I don't have HBO, so I haven't watched it.
The show is very good. It's nominated for basically every character or every important category you can think of: outstanding drama series, lead actor, lead actress, 4 nominations for guest actor, 3 nominations for guest actress, best casting, costumes, directing, editing, hairstyling, title design, makeup, writing, music composition, editing, mixing, special effects. I mean, it was nominated for everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's doing, I'm glad it's doing well. I'm glad that it is like positively received enough, because I mean, everything I've heard about it has been, is that it's pretty, it's exceptional. So
yeah, I think that what's going to be interesting is if this thing does come out, this updated version of the game, like what is the response going to be, because there was so much flack given to them doing a PS5 version of The Last of Us Part 1 after that game already had a remaster on the PS4. They were saying like, is this really necessary? And this game is even more current. This game's only a few years old.
Yeah, this came out in 2020.
Yeah.
And I remember even just seeing visuals of it, I'm like, this game looks stunning.
It's a very nice looking game.
Yeah. So like, I think, how much could they really do to it?
Yeah.
It just seems,
I think it'd be nice for them to do it just so you could play both of those games as a native PS5 experience. Maybe they, I don't know, make the lighting a little bit nicer, textures a little bit nicer, whatever it may be. But because I don't think that this is designed necessarily for people like you and I. Well, I guess maybe if you decided that you wanted to ultimately play this game and this version was available, you'd probably just buy the PS5 version instead of buying the PS4 version. But I think that this is more in line with, hey, we have this whole new audience because of the show. Let's give them a modern version, because if they're not super into video games, they might see an older systems version and be like, oh, I don't know if I want to play that, because it's a PS4 game and I have a PS5 and my PS5 doesn't play PS4 games. And they might not know that they could buy it digitally and play it on their PS5. So I think that it helps from a market standpoint, like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say, I mean, it's still, I think it's valid to update this game and do a version of it for modern hardware. So yeah, I think it's still, it's good for them to do that. I wonder if there would be, some sort of incentive to like, if people bought the original game, like, 'cause it's not that old, to just be like, here's a discount to like have an upgraded PS5 version of it of some sort. But I'm sure that, they didn't do that with the, with the other Last of Us part.
Oh, when the show came out, they cranked that fucking price right back up to full price because it was like on sale quite a bit.
Was it?
Yeah, leading up to it. And then when the show came out, I think it was by the time the numbers came out on Monday for how well the premiere did, everybody, like GameStop took it off sale. The Sony store took it off sale.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Wow.
And I don't think it's been on sale since.
Jeez. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, they're going to try to,
Oh, and I mean, it became like their top selling game at that time. I mean, like everybody was running out to buy. I mean, I thought about buying it again.
So did I, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard I don't know how. I remember that PC launch was rough. So
I think they fixed a lot of it. I haven't checked in with it. I didn't end up getting it. At one point I was like, oh, maybe I'll pick it up and see, but I was a little bit put off too much by not getting a clear answer if it's kind of been fixed. Because even like Jedi Survivor, it's still like kind of busted for some people on PC. Yeah. So it's maybe we'll wait.
That's fair.
Yeah. But that will wrap things up for this week. Davis, I want to thank you for hanging out. We had some fun technical issues today.
Did.
So
we got through it.
Some weird edits throughout this video. You'll understand why. Right. But yeah.
We powered through. We are professionals.
Yes, it's super professional. Very professional.
We are.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for having me. This has been fun. I will be happy to be on again. So whenever I'm sure like when Armored Core comes out, I'll want to come on and talk about it.
Yeah. So, that's what, August?
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll have you back. Certainly.
Sounds good.
I think the demo is coming soon from what I saw. I think the demo is soon. Yeah. I saw something about a play test of some sort. I don't know if it's like an invite thing or not, or if they're just gonna stick a demo out there. But I remember seeing an article about that the other day.
Cool.
So
that'd be cool. Yeah, I would. I'll definitely check that out. I have to.
All right. So coming up on the channel this week. So tomorrow I'm going to have a video of some Exoprimal footage. I'm going to record some of that and toss that up on the channel. And then a couple more shorts throughout the week. And then we'll be right back here next week. Unfortunately, Christian Slater will be returning. He is off in his mountain retreat fighting toasters right now. But he will be back, unfortunately, for next week's episode. So
I know I want to meet him someday. He seems like he's had nothing but nice things to say about me. So
yeah. Oh yeah. No, he's super. I mean, as much as he doesn't like you, he certainly likes you a hell of a lot more than he likes me. So
that's debatable.
No, he's not trying to suffocate you in the middle of the night. So
yeah.
All right. Take it easy, everybody. And we'll see you next week.